Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the State of Women in Science panel discussion. My name is Nora Lin. I'm the current president of the Society of Women Engineers. And my daytime job, or my daytime paid job, is the manager of supportability engineering of Northrop Grumman Electronic Systems in Rolling Meadows, Illinois. Actually, I was a physicist by training and am an engineer by practice. And I feel very well fitted in this setting. And I have been in the defense industry for more than 26 years, and I spent the first 18 years of my career in software engineering and have been in systems and supportability engineering for the past 8 years. Following the first session roundtable discussion, and we all know that women are the minorities in the science, engineering, technology, and mathematics, we call the STEM fields. So issues that are experienced by women in engineering are very similar to those issues experienced by women in science. We have 3 panelists for this session is Dr. D.M. Davis, and Kai-E Lee, and then Alice Stolmacher. So the format for this discussion will be the first for me to take a few minutes to share some statistics on women in science. And after that, I will ask each panelist to speak for about 10 minutes to share her perspectives and experiences in her discipline area. And we will then have a Q&A period at the end. You do have your note cards. If you have questions, please write them down. The volunteers will collect them, and we will try to answer those questions during that time. So for those questions that were not answered, we will hold them until the breakout sessions and try to answer all of them for you. So let's now take a quick look at some of the statistics on women in science. The first slide, it shows women earned the STEM degree, bachelor's degree in STEM fields. It's gradually growing. And totally right now, we can see about 40% of women earned the bachelor degrees in STEM, including engineering, math, computer science, physics, and chemistry. Okay, this is the bachelor degrees in engineering. And you can see for women, we kind of pick up by about 1981 and kind of stayed flat and for the past almost 20 years. So there's a question about why. And also, one thing troubling specifically for me is we see the number of women earning the bachelor degrees kind of like a 20% for the past 20 years. But the women in engineering workforce, we remain in about 11% for the past 10 years. So what are the reasons, we're the pipeline? If we graduated 20% of the people, how come the workforce, we remain in about 10, 11% for the past 10, 15 years? And this is another slide shows the percentage of degrees received by women in science fields. And you can see the biological and the biomedical science. There's a lot of women earning the bachelor degrees in there, actually over 60%. And also chemistry, women are well represented there, at least a little bit over 50%. But for the engineering or computer science, that's remained very, very low. And the women in science and engineering faculties, area, you can see the percentage of the assistant, associate, and the full professor level in 5 categories of science and engineering fields. This is based on the National Science Foundation's data. And overall, women are less likely to be full professors and are more likely than men to be assistant professors or instructors. And part of this difference in rank can be explained by age difference, but differences in rank remain even after taking age into account. So of the more than 124,000 tenured doctoral scientists and engineers employed by academia, about 82% of men and 18% are women. So as you can see, there's definitely gender equity issues here. And also the fields make quite a difference. And this is the overall chart shows women as a percent of selected US occupations. The highlight in the dark blue, that's the all occupations. So women close to 50% in all occupations. And however, the overall science and engineering workforce in the United States, including the academia and the non-academia positions, and that were less, especially for engineering part, and for the economics, psychology, sociology, and other political science, they are a little bit better than engineering part. And for the salary, you can see there is a wage gap in science. And women earns about 77% as much as men in 2005. And this is based on the median income for full-time and year-round women workers. So we can see gender equity issues are common to engineering and science, including mathematics, physics, and computer science. So at this point, I would like to introduce the first panelist as Dr. Deanne Davis. She is the VP of Regulatory Affairs. Where did it go? Okay. She's the VP of Regulatory Affairs, Sustainability, and Toxicology at Alberto Culver. So I'm going to ask her to introduce her a little bit more and share her insight on her areas. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So first I want to thank the organizers for asking me to come. I actually love these opportunities because I think you'll find my story a little bit different than some of the other stories traditionally heard about women in science, okay? I work for a beauty care company. I make shampoo. That, you know, I don't apologize for it. I don't excuse it. Actually used it a lot to my advantage in terms of how to become a successful leader in a science role in a non-science company. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that story, some of the challenges that I've had and some of the successes that I've had, and hopefully, you know, there's a little something in there for everybody. Okay, so like I said, I'll talk a little bit about my career background. Actually, as I said, I am a scientist. I do have a PhD. And how kind of doing science like a girl has really become very much my mantra in terms of leadership and has actually led to a lot of successful appointments, not within the current company I have, but also within the industry itself. Okay, so this is sort of my, someone said, is there a straight or linear path? No, my path to where I am today was never linear, not at all what I thought I'd be doing when I first took my major as an undergraduate. To where I am today. You're looking at a girl who was raised in Southern California who surfed and picked her college and her major because she thought it was slightly rebellious, and the college because I like to surf and it was on the ocean. So you're not talking about a real, like, let's go get it type of decision. In college, like the other people here, I got married as an undergraduate, so I've been married for over 26 years, and which has brought its delights and challenges. But, you know, somehow in college, I realized that I was like a whole lot smarter than I ever gave myself credit for. And as I watched other men or guys sort of in my field, you know, had these really ambitious careers, I thought, you know what, I really should be there as well, and why not me, right? You know, I was smarter than them, I was getting better grades than they were, and I was surfing more, so what the heck, right? So I actually got a full ride scholarship for my graduate degree. So my graduate degree at Texas A&M was fully funded, both my stipend as well as my school. My husband tagged along with me. And the reason why I chose toxicology is because I walked in and half the professors told me to go home. They said, "You're married, you're a woman, I'm not interested in having you as my student." The one man who was, I said, "Okay, can we strike a deal? Because I got 4 years here and I need to be done in 4 years." And he said, "Yeah, I'll do it for you." So that's how I got in toxicology. Actually, nothing more to it than that. He turned out to be an excellent mentor because one of the things he told me about myself, which I never really appreciated, was that people were always going to underestimate what I could do for them. Mainly because I was so feminine, because I was married, because I didn't have that typical aura of like a really smart person. So it's been very helpful. Okay, so I was going to go on and get an MD, but then my husband looked at me and said, "I'm not staying in College Station, Texas anymore, so you either come with me or, you know, you stay here." So I decided to stay married and went back with my husband and took an academic appointment at the University of New Mexico, which was where his next career opportunity was. I was there a couple of years and my son was born. Now, the interesting thing, and I won't go into a lot of stories, but University of New Mexico had so few women faculty members, they didn't have a maternity leave policy. This is 1991. So 2 weeks later, my baby's sitting out in the baby carriage right outside my laboratory door, and you know, that's how I did my first academic appointment. After a few years of doing that, I had the opportunity to go to Procter & Gamble. And as a specialist in toxicology, one of the things that you get to be very good at is risk assessment. And they actually hired me because I was good at that. And I was hired into the beauty care division, which is exactly how I got my job. And I thought this was fabulous because it was good money, regular hours, you know, and there were actually about half of the scientists that I worked with were women. So to me, it didn't seem all that unusual. So then, the next path in my career was really an opportunity to get some global experience. The reason why I had this great opportunity with P&G was because I was such a girl. And I had to go in and actually negotiate with a company that they had just purchased to really, and use a really soft touch, to start doing the things the way that P&G wanted them done from a science standpoint. So with the success of that, I actually was able to get a promotion and took my next level. So that was really great. So I had my first management opportunity. Then I got called up and someone said, "Hey, we have this great job in Arizona. How would you like to take that next level in management?" And I'm like, "Oh, cool, you know, like more money, broader opportunity." So I actually took yet another management opportunity. Again, I'm still in science. I'm still in a consumer product good company, but I get the opportunity to do clinical research, lead microbiology, as well as continue to do human health risk assessment. Then we got bought. So the company I'm with right at that point is the Dial Corporation, which was bought by Henkel. Henkel is a German company, and in order to progress in management, you have to actually be able to move globally, which I wasn't able to do because I still wanted to be married, and by then I had 3 children. So instead, I switched field and actually spent some time in product development. So I actually developed soap, body washes for men, and bar soaps for men for about 3 years. Had a great time. Listened to a lot of guys talk about showers. So in focus groups with consumer research. Then, you know, after a bit, I thought, you know what, I really wanted to get back to some technical expertise and really sort of get back to who I was as a scientist. So I went on to Kimberly-Clark and took a global management position, which was extraordinarily interesting in terms of challenging my ability as a science leader. Because not only am I not managing, now I'm managing a group of experts, but they're also a group of experts in about 50 different cultures, because I had people I had to manage in about 50 different countries. So then so I continued to do that, and then interestingly enough, I got a call from a recruiter who said that there is somebody in Chicago who really wants you to come work for them. And the reason why they really wanted me to come work for them is because I asked really great questions. Whenever they saw me outside of the company, they would go, my gosh, she's got a handle on stuff. She really asks really great questions. So that's what brought me to where I am today. I will tell you 2 of the areas that I manage I've actually have never had experience in before, but they are technical areas and they've been a great experience. So let me talk a little bit about why I think women are good at human health risk assessment and why you shouldn't be afraid to be a girl. And I don't want to take a lot of time here, but just put it in a nutshell. You have to know a little bit about a lot of things, okay? But you can't ever be the expert at anything except how to do the assessment, because you'll never have enough knowledge to get it done well. The other thing is that it's also highly influenced by things that typically aren't appreciated by scientists. So those soft, intangible things, how people feel. Oh my gosh, I spend a lot of time talking about how people feel. And it's about scientists, like, who cares, you know? But that's reality. It's also highly influenced by perception. So what you think is risk and what I think is risk may not be the same, nor may not be translated the same in different cultures or by different authorities. Also, it's a science that society typically gets wrong. So I'm doing science in a business that could care less about science, trying to solve problems they didn't even know they had, which is also an extraordinary, both leadership as well as technical challenge. So let's talk a little bit about, like I said, I am very much a girl. I've never apologized for it. Perhaps, maybe I'd be a little bit farther if I had, but that's just the reality. But these are really the things that I have focused on and really have worked in terms of building into my leadership, both my science and my leadership ability. So to do risk assessment well, you really have to nurture that expert advice. You have to understand you don't have it, and you have to nurture it or get it out of others. You have to crave validation. In order to get my assessment right so that you all agree that this risk is correct for that chemical and your safety, I have to get your approval. So I have to really get it validated. The other thing I have to do is use my intuition. I have to leap to what you're going to think and be able to speak in your language. The other thing I have to do is I have to think about the whole picture, right? Because it's as much about how I got there as what I got accomplished. So why do these make a difference when you're talking about science leadership? Because it's exactly what I do as a leader as well. So I understand, okay, so I have to tell you a funny story. So one time in my career, I was getting sort of like talked in the hallway to by a senior vice president. And I just looked at him, and because, I sort of cut somebody off in a meeting. he goes, Dan, he goes, really, you've got to learn how not to be the smartest person in the room. And I said, but I don't get it. Am I trying to be effective, or am I running for prom queen? And he looked at me and he said, very straight-faced, both. So I think it's important that I've learned not to be the smartest person in the room. I might know the answer. I might just ask the great question to pull it out of someone. Crave validation. Do your homework. In industry, you get so much more authority if you're right and you did your homework and you can speak to it. Use your intuition. Know what you're good at and stick to it. I have never pretended, like I said, to be the expert at everything. And again, it gets back to that relational part. Okay, so I get it now. I may never get to be prom queen. I don't really care, but I do understand the importance of relationships. And again, be a holistic thinker. People really do care about the journey that they're on as you're trying to lead people in technical careers. So my experience really is, for what it's worth, and again, I approach this with all humility because, like I said, there's probably 10,000 things I could have done better. But don't be afraid to be a girl in a technical field. There really are places and roles for you where it is truly an advantage. And remember that relationships matter. We're good at them. So step out of your silo and form those relationships. Take advantage of your minority position. Like I said, I have never tried not to wear high heels, even though the guy in the room might be shorter than me. I've never hesitated to wear a skirt, never apologized for being a mom. You know, it just doesn't hurt your career that much. It's just not worth it to apologize for those things. Don't be afraid to surround yourself with really smart people. You'd be surprised how good you can be if you can be just a little bit humble and pull the best out of everyone. And like I said, you know, it's all about being bold. You know, someone said it's about confidence. Yeah, be bold. Guys are bold. They don't think they're not the smartest person in the room. That's where they come from, right? But be passionate. Choose something that you truly can go to bed at night and say, my gosh, I made a difference. Well, yeah, I mean, I am making a difference. Even though my life is about shampoo and mascara, I am making a difference, and that feels good to me at the end of the day. And also, I spend now, as a leader in a non-science group, really being about others. It's no longer a career about me. It's a career about a technical team that's underneath me.
Thank you, Deanne, for your wonderful story and the hints about how to be yourself and be able to, you know, have the confidence and strike for excellence in your own career. Our next panelist is Dr. K.E. Lee, and she's the director of the Chicago Materials Research Center at the University of Chicago and a fellow of the American Physical Society.
Thank you. I also want to thank the organizer for the opportunity to be here and speak to this audience. So I'll give you a little bit of my background. I am currently in the Department of Chemistry, and I have been at the University of Chicago since 1998. And very recently, I have assumed the directorship of the Materials Research Science and Engineering Center. But I have gone through a very convoluted path before I got here. So I came here all the way from Hong Kong as a foreign student, did my undergraduate in electrical engineering, my graduate work in applied physics, my first postdoc in chemistry, and the second postdoc in chemical engineering. So it looks somewhat like a random walk. I also have gone through the two-body problem, whereby I have lived apart from my husband for 5 years, but now we live in the same city. And I'm also a mother of 3. So the way how I started my faculty position in 1998 is that I deferred the start date by 1 year. And since I don't want to know how much a kid would take away from time from my work, the only way as a scientist to think that it's possible to do that is to have no data as to how much it would take away, so I need to have the kid before I start the job. So in that 1 year off, we managed to have a kid, and I actually moved and started with a 6-week-old baby. So I started in 98, and in 1999, this was actually focused in the Chronicle of Higher Education. And basically, you can see is a bunch of women scientists at MIT that actually started questioning the equity issues in the academia. And in some articles that was written afterwards, they said that what Nancy Hopkins of MIT has done to this women in science issue is very much similar to the very high-profile kind of cases that other people have brought forth and make a very big difference, not just locally at one institution, but globally at many, many institutions and workplaces. So back in the meeting, now moving a little bit forward to 2001, the statement of the leaders at MIT are as follows. They said, you know, really, Institute of Higher Education have an obligation both for themselves and for nations to really fully develop all the creative talents is available. Using only 50% of the population, just the male, is just not good for our nation, nor is it good for the institute as a whole. And so what they agreed to do is really to analyze, data is what they're craving for, the salaries and the proportions of all the university resources that is being provided to female faculty. And they also want to work towards a faculty that really reflects the diversity of the student body. So in 1999 already, MIT have almost like a 50% female to male population, which is a big change from, say, the late 80s, where the percentage was only 25% in terms of women. And so at the very end, they recognized that this challenge would actually require significant review of, as well as significant change in both the procedures within each university, as well as within the scientific and engineering establishment. So in this morning sessions, we talk about some of the procedures in terms of how we are going to have training for the new appointments or hiring committee, and that is very crucial to really bring the first step along to bring women into academia. So we have talked about, and we know a lot about, there exists a leaky pipeline. And in order to really increase the participation of women in the sciences and academia, we need to sort of understand this problem. So this is the recent data that came out from the National Academy of Science report that came out at the end of last year, or during the summer, and the report is now available. And some of the data you saw reflects what we saw earlier in terms of the doctoral pool, and you see that different disciplines have different issues. So for example, if you look at chemistry, which is where I am in, we have 50% or over 50% of undergrads that are women, and at the graduate level, we have on the order of 32%, as shown here. Now, when you go to the postdoc level, it drops to the 20s, and when you go to the faculty level, it goes down even further to the teens. And so when you were to compare the first column versus the second column, you see in all the 6 disciplines, you see what you really see in this case is that in all of them, there is a drop from the doctoral pool to the percentage of applicants to the academic positions. And it is just across the board, irrespective of what discipline that you are in. And so if you were to look at the leak in the pipelines to tenure for women PhDs in the sciences, there seems to be 2 locations. The first location happens at the receiving a tenure track position location. And the numbers you might not be able to read, but I would have a second slide that show you the pie chart, which is a little bit easier to look at. And the second one has to do with acquiring tenure. And from the study just recently released by Berkeley, what they have found is that the desire to shift away from a research professor's career goal actually happened very early on. It happens during the training. So when you are a PhD student or when you're a postdoc, the experience that you see or what you perceive your mentor or your environment is creating make a very big impression on the decision whether to continue in the academic world or not. And of the survey that was done, family formation, especially marriage and childbirth, seems to constitute the largest leak in the pipeline between PhD recipient and the acquisition of the tenure track position. So since the work-family conflict seems to be at the forefront, let's look at some data of how it looks like in an academic type of setting. So what is shown here is the data that is done at the University of California campus of entering tenure track positions. Basically, the data shows you that married men with children under 6 are 50% more likely to enter a tenure track position as compared to women, married women with children under 6. And if you were to sort of look at the peak point of the blue curve up there versus the red curve, the peak point that is up there, is basically what this data is telling us. If you were to look at the children in a household, and these are self-reported number, you can look at a women assistant professor, and basically 75% decided not to have children, and you might have 1 child, and the percentage of having children is much smaller. This compared to the similar pool of assistant professor in the male, then you see that the number is rather different, and especially that there is this slice of, people having 3 children as assistant professor that does not exist in the female domain. So one of the things to look at is really what are the policies that the university as well as funding agency would be able to change this. So one question is like, why are there so few women in academia? So what is shown here and in the graph here is basically showing about the least family-friendly career choice seems to be teaching in a research university. So what is shown in the diagram here is listing graduate student researcher, postdoctoral fellows, as well as academic researcher, and the lowest one is the faculty. And as you go early and early on the pipeline, it seems that the kind of benefits that young scientists get is getting less and less. Meaning that if that is the time when you decide whether you want to pick science as your career in academia, then you're rather discouraged in terms of the kind of benefits, in terms of leave, paid leave for maternity leave that exist only in 13% when you're a graduate student and 23% of the institute when you're a postdoc. And so clearly, this really discouraged women who are thinking to have a family as well as to juggle a career in the academia to really consider seriously taking the step to go into the academic world. Another thing you might want to know is that since a lot of the funding comes from federal agencies, the policies that is put forth by federal agencies also dictate what kind of the policy, in part, the university could have in supporting this family-friendly programs. So what is seen in the data down there is also that as time goes, it seems that it takes a longer and longer time before we would get our tenure. So what is shown here in terms of the number is that the average age for tenure recipient is 36 in 1985, and it jumped up 3 years by 2007. And the average age for getting an NIH R01 actually jumps from 34 years old to 42 in 2007. The lockstep structure of the academia is also very unforgiving, that makes it very hard to really juggle at the age point that we have to deal with the family, with raising a young family, or really to take care of aging parents and stuff like that. And as discussed earlier, this type of responsibility falls unevenly on women versus men. So what we are trying to hope is that we want to find a solution now that we have identified what is the pipeline issue very early on, as well as the ability to get tenured in the academia. How can university, research university, as well as our federal agency do something to help make that happen? So over the past, I would say, 12 years or so, there has been a lot of changes, and many universities are looking inward to see what they can do to improve the situation, to provide more family-friendly policies. So, for example, there are time-based policy and benefits that are in place in a lot of the institutions, including stopping the clock and having re-entry right. But it's interesting to find out that when the stopping the clock policy, for example, was not mandated to be taken by both men and women, it seems that the data suggests that there are actually more men taking advantage of this stopping the clock as a carer as opposed to women. And so certain university has now mandated that both men and women need to really be able to consider without being asked, because when you have to ask, then you worry about you showing some sort of weakness that people would think, and worry whether you are really dedicated and committed to your research. Another thing is that there could be monetary supplements or benefits in terms of continued coverage, in terms of healthcare for not just the faculty level. So when I was starting with my 6 weeks old in Hyde Park looking for childcare, the price was really high. That was back in 1998. But then my salary is much higher than what would a postdoc and a graduate student get for their stipend. So if it is very high for a starting faculty member, it's really humbling to listen to some of the stories that our students and postdocs tell us in terms of how they make the juggle. So if the university can really implement and give rise to good supplemental allowances to allow students have, for example, paid maternity leave, and this was actually instituted in MIT in the early 2000s, then that would make a big difference in terms of this student who are under time pressure, as well as the pressure, financial pressure, to really bring this forth. Childcare, of course, is one of the top priority that everyone worries about. And now at various places, there are on and off-campus centers with university giving subsidies and providing referral service. And there are also other resources that are important to make this a family-friendly issue. But on the other hand, since most of our funding in terms of supporting our graduate student, postdoc, as well as at least in the biological sciences, as supporting our own salary, then the federal agency can play a very big role. And they have, made some headway to start the process. So what is shown here is that the number of current offerings from the different federal agencies in terms of possible family-friendly policies. So you can see, and I'm happy to say that NIH and NSF are really the leaders in terms of the federal agencies in pushing this issue forward in order to increase the participation of women in the academia. But you can also see from this that it is very uneven. And so in order to move it forward in the next step, I think that needs really the collaborations of the various federal agencies as well as between the federal agency and the university to play a role to move this forward. So this coordination is needed both in terms of promoting a clear as well as well-communicated baseline for this policy. And I highlighted well communicated because a policy can be very nice and well, but if people don't know about it and people cannot really are too scared to ask about it. So I can use myself as an example. I defer my start date for my faculty position by 1 year. Then I get pregnant. I was worried, how am I supposed to even tell them that I get pregnant? Would they worry and second guess about the decision of hiring me? So I came, during that year to look at my lab renovation and to recruit students, and somehow, as pregnancy is unfortunately something that you cannot hide, and so, it has to come out at some point, and it just came out at the lunch table. And very much to my surprise, that the immediate response of my colleague is that, we'll need to throw you a shower. So a lot of the times you worry about things and how people perceive you without, asking for questions and asking what is available, sort of impede our ability to move forward. And so a well-communicated baseline is really necessary. And also the university supplement, as well as to move towards a full package, is really necessary. But what is most important is really to collect and analyze local data. So what I've only addressed here is just one part. We want to attract the people to solve the leaking pipeline issue, but there are other institutional transformation. Talk about the unconscious bias, the putting into place good hiring policy, and preventing, as mentioned earlier, feeling of isolation and alienation, providing mentoring support, as well as networking capability for women. But most important of all is that all the policy has to be transparent. Transparency is very important in order to really get the information to both male and female alike. And we have found in our university that understanding local culture, providing local data, and talk to your fellow administrator and faculty would be very useful to move the agenda forward. Also, NSF has this advanced program, and its main point is really to increase the participation and the advancement of women in science. So here listed the history of how many awards has been granted. And this has actually played an instrumental part for us to understand our internal local culture and for us to put together all the good ideas and best practices to be shared among the different constitutions to bring forth institutional change. And so I did start with the MIT report, and this is a follow-up in 2006, which suggests that women's gain in science at MIT have actually stalled because if you don't keep constantly push the issue and push the envelope and push the administration, then somehow it just falls back to the status quo, and the current status quo is still somewhat against the hiring of women. So what Nancy Hopkins say, that it's not really a result of conscious and deliberate discrimination, but because of different departmental circumstances and hiring tendency that tends to work against women in academia. So I would just want to end this by saying that we all have to be vigilant to push our administration locally to really move the next step forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lee, for lead us into a deeper study on the pipeline, leaking pipeline issues, and share with us on some of the policies and best practices we can implement it to improve the situation. The next panelist is Dr. Alice Stallmacher, and she's the Associate Professor of the Department of Psychology at the DePaul University. Since the women are more than 50% in the psychology, maybe she can discuss the move beyond popular press.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here, delighted to be a social scientist, to join the natural sciences. I have a passion for this topic. As an undergrad, I was undecided major, and I went up to my junior year taking both chemistry and psychology, and ultimately flipped to psychology and ended up with a chemistry minor. And as an Iowa psychologist, that importance of women in science is something that I've carried with me for a long time, thinking about women and their rise in organization. So industrial organizational psychology is a field of psychology that looks at people in the workplace as well as looking at areas within psychology. And the topic of women in science has not been ignored by psychology. In 2006, they put out a book talking about why aren't more women in science, looking at sort of the issues that are involved. And some of those discussions involved, first of all, talking about gender differences and what we know and what we don't know and what those processes are. An area that's particularly close to my passion is looking at meta-analyses, taking existing data, existing studies, kind of see what the patterns are for men and women in the different fields and different scenarios and different settings to see, first of all, what that can tell us. So in some of the psychology writings in some of these areas, we find that there are very small differences between men and women in a lot of areas. Then there are some that are larger, and the biologists among us can talk about some of the genetic and biological influences among aggression and perhaps some mobility and strength kinds of areas. And that has led some people to say that the difference is not worth considering, and paying attention to that difference is a problem. On the other hand, some of my work, and they've reviewed some of my work, meta-analyses looking at negotiation, and even though the differences are small, are very small, there's a cumulative effect over time if you're doing this kind of pattern of behavior that might lead to different outcomes between men and women. So as an organizational psychologist, part of the challenge is thinking about how to interpret these data. What do they mean? What do the patterns tell us? So again, there's the general gender similarities idea that men and women are basically the same, and it's true. There's differences, those effect sizes are small. The perspective that I take is sort of looking at the context. When does it shift? When does it make a difference for women? What are some of the things that we should be aware of, for good or bad? At least knowing about it should help us understand it. So for example, some of the patterns I think are really intriguing. Here's some effect sizes from a meta-analysis on mathematics performance between men and women. And these are cumulative effect size D, effect size of D, so you interpret it as a standard deviation. A negative means that women, or girls in this case, did better. Positive mean that men did better. And you can see developmentally there was very small to no differences at the age 5 through 10, ages 11 through 12. Even in the computation and concepts area of math performance, they didn't find any differences until you got to the problem-solving area for age 15 through 18. And the researchers that did this study speculated that part of that reason might be that women in high school are taking less of those science classes, because science classes are where perhaps that problem-solving skill is developed. And the fact that there's the gender difference, again, not a huge gender difference, but over time, it does reflect some differences in ability or perhaps problem solving. And in the psychology research, I think these studies are important. They tell us things and give us ideas of where the sources of gender differences are. And there's, despite the evidence of some biological differences, there's a huge amount of evidence about the social, cultural aspects of gender differences between men and women. A whole bunch of research on how families make a difference in terms of boys are explained more science when they go to museums than the girls are. or how teachers pay attention to the boy students more than the girl students. A whole bunch of research on that. There's interesting research on stereotype threat. The fact if you draw attention to a negative stereotype of your group, that distracts or seems to take some of your attention away from solving maybe the math problems or the other things you should be doing, and results in a decrement of performance, paying attention to those group differences. There's been some interesting work on training people to become, let's say, more effective with spatial ability or problem solving, and to show that these are not biologically necessarily determined as much as sort of perhaps some experience-based. Interestingly, there's some clear research on culture that when we compare men and women in the United States, those differences are not at all as large as we compare US versus other cultures. So while men may do better on some performance outcomes than women, clearly the women from other cultures are doing better than men in the US. So there's a huge body of literature suggesting what's going on in different cultures as teaching math and science skills. And also, as we saw in some of the graphs earlier, there are trends over time. What do we see people entering fields? Women are obviously succeeding. They're getting doctorates. They're going on to postdocs. They're doing things that would suggest that there are some cultural factors that are helping promote that. But so that suggests to me the area to look at is what's happening once they get out of school. So my research has looked at gender and negotiation. So look at gender differences. I've done several meta-analyses on the difference between men and women in negotiation settings. And also, I'm also looking at organizational factors. What are organizations doing? How are systems perhaps influencing what men and women pursue and what opportunities they look at? So there's two different lines of research. Let me just tell you a couple of things that I find interesting and relevant to some of the discussion we've had already today. So first of all, there was some discussion in the panel earlier about gender differences in negotiation, and my work is focused on the behavioral differences, the profit differences, the differences when you're face-to-face versus when you're not, differences on how you're perceived in mediation setting or how confident people feel, and there are differences. They're homogeneous across these studies. They're very small, maybe D effect sizes of 0.1. And I think they can add up over time. So in any course of any particular day or year, you are negotiating. Whether it's not always your salary negotiation, it is looking for space, it's looking for resources, it's who gets access to different resources. So the cumulative amount of negotiation is important, as well as if you don't negotiate for your first job offer and your salary is based on percent increases, you generally see that decrement. You can see decrement over time. So what I think is most interesting about these findings, though, not just the overall homogeneous sort of pattern of the effect sizes, is what makes it flip. And probably this will be something we'll talk about more in our later session about what's the context that make women more successful in negotiation. What are those times that actually women have an advantage, and what makes it the context particularly salient? So what I don't want to lead us with the impression is that gender differences in negotiation are something that women need to fix, that women have a problem with. And as a field of psychology, there's something called the fundamental attribution theory, which you all maybe remember from intro psych, that we tend to blame people or attribute or describe people's behavior based on internal factors, not recognizing the impact of the situation or the context. So as we try to describe why women aren't getting access or why different things are happening in the pipeline, I think our previous speaker did a great job sort of saying, well, let's look at the system. Let's look at what external factors are going on. Kind of stepping back from that, well, it's not that women aren't smart enough. It's not that women aren't motivated enough, that women don't work hard enough, that women don't have ideas. It's sort of like, what's the system that's doing to support them? So my areas of research now are sort of taking a look at what organizations are doing to support and change the systems that make it a better place for men and women in organization. And one of the areas I've turned to, it just went blank, is looking at what organizations are doing and how does that influence the work experience for the people in that work organization, and how does that result to the bottom line impact of that organization? What's the business impact? What does it make a difference for? And so, just to give you a short idea of the kinds of things I'm talking about, is that organizations vary on how much they support women in the workplace, and men too, in terms of, is the supervisor providing good role models? Do they allow that sort of discussion of things that are happening at home to also be something that you could talk about at work? What kind of leadership is involved? How kind of communication is there? A lot of organizations offer benefits that people might be too afraid to ask for. What kind of climate and structures is going on in that organization? And we have some preliminary data on this that shows a huge effect of those variables on women's reports of work-family conflict, how confident they feel about their career, their control over work and life, which is control is a big factor in reducing stress, life satisfaction, conflict with leisure activities, promotions, job satisfaction, and then also the data links to really important organizational outcomes. Organizational citizenship behavior are things that people may be going above and beyond what they're required to. They go to meetings that they don't have to, or they they help colleagues, or they're committed to their, what the organization's doing and has less turnover intentions. So I think the kind of things I've heard today, for one, reflect a great knowledge of some of the social science things that we've been studying and talking about, and also sort of recognition that it's not necessarily the woman's job to tackle these issues alone. It's really a socio-cultural sort of pattern, and the workplace has changed for men and women, and in terms of thinking about the patterns and systems that make things available. It's interesting to see how women are perhaps more sensitive to the context than men. And just let me share one study I just saw that was particularly relevant, perhaps, to this discussion how women are sensitive to context. There's a study with veterinarians, and they presented a case to men and women veterinarians, and went with a diagnosis of a problem a dog was having. And the veterinarian could choose a certain kind of treatment, a heroic, risky treatment, or one that was very, maybe sort of safe and doable. And they also said who the owner was. Was the owner a young professional or an elderly widower? For the men, there was no difference in their diagnosis or their recommendation. They chose the more risky, expensive treatment in the case of treating the dog. For the women, they weren't as risky overall, but they also were sensitive, like who am I working with? What's that relationship involved? So I think that's an interesting, and there's a number of other interesting areas about how women are paying attention to the context. And I think that's an important skill and an important sort of behaviors we can bring in the workplace. So I'm very excited about the kind of conversations that we're having here, and I will stop so we have some time for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I got quite a bunch of very good questions, and I'm trying to manage that and to have the panelists answer as many as possible. The first one is the treatment of women in science and the shortage of women in science is a problem for all people in science. So how can we get more men involved in the conversations? Anyone wants to take?
I think that's the most important thing, is to get men to be involved in that. And I think I can see that is happening. A lot of time is not because they want to discriminate, but they are just unaware. And so that's why I said the unconscious bias awareness, to really promote it so that people actually learn about that. And as mentioned earlier in the roundtable, it's both men and women, and there are studies, psychology study, on that as well, to say that, you know, the bias is there. And once we know that the bias is there, then it still takes time for us to address it and change the pattern of behavior. But clearly, if I only have 10% in my discipline that are women in academic, in order to make change, we really need to get the majority to come in.
I would agree. And I think men generally like the direction that women are bringing into the workforce. I know when my husband took family leave, and I think he had some concerns about how would it be seen for his career if he was taking some time off with our daughter when she was born. But because there's a workplace that let men and women do it, encouraged it, and celebrated that, it kind of made it easier. Whereas the women, it was much more perhaps expected or not as unusual. So I think if we stress the aspects that there are a lot of similarities between men and women, what makes women happy also helps a lot of other people in their lives, and vice versa. It's maybe not that hard of a message, but there's so much momentum and tradition in terms of how things traditionally have been done. I think that it is a challenge.
Okay, thank you. Maybe the next question will go to Deanne. Is how did you navigate a career that required you to move around and having a husband or partner who also has a job?
That's a really long story on how to stay married for 26 years. I think I think at some point my husband and I got to a place where my career just took precedent. Not because either of us chose to stay at home, but I frankly was just better at it, in terms of earning money. So, and so you just kind of, you've got 3 kids, you got to figure out what to do. And then, of course, about 10 years ago, he also started his own business. So he does work from home about 3 weeks out of the month, and then from his business is in Arizona, and then there for about a week out of the month. So I've been blessed to be able to do that. I think though you have to choose. I mean, it's always a constant negotiation, and it's a constant, like, sometimes they come first, sometimes you come first, and sometimes the kids come first. So that's the best I can tell you. It's you got to choose marriage first. That's the fundamental.
Well, when I decided to have a kid before I started my faculty position, I just remembering that, cartoon, that comic strip is that, where the woman is like, oh, I forgot to have kids. So, so what my feeling is that when I come to that point of my career, there's only one way that I know how to work. And if I work as hard as I do, it depends on how the stars are aligned and all that. If somehow I don't get tenure, I'm not going to say that I'm not going to have a family. So if my family comes first in the sense that I know that I want to have a family, and if that academic job somehow doesn't work out, then maybe I have to reevaluate whether the academic job is for me or not. And so we have a two-body problem that we actually ended up spending 5 years apart, and I think it's important for both of us that early on in our training, we need to go to the best place that is for our career, and then we are on the same page that we understand that. And so the training part is easy, but the difficulty comes when you find a more long-term position that there has to be sacrifice and compromise that is made.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, we are aware that there are salary differences between men and women. What is the best way to initiate change in an organization to identify and correct the gender bias in salaries?
I think that's a system problem. I think there's definitely things women can do in terms of approaching and looking at their own situation, but it really is helpful if an organization takes that perspective. An organization is saying, we need to do a compensation study, we need to sort of look at that, we need to run the analyses to compare men and women's salaries. So I would say the best place to start would be looking at the system rather than trying to individually. Though it's not a bad strategy to go in and sort of bring the data and say, this is what the average is, this is what I'm being paid. And that works for you individually, but doesn't necessarily mean it'll be a correcting mechanism, and it'll work out over the long term. So to the extent that there's transparency in the system, that's clear what the factors are that people are being looked at, and the system sort of recognizes it's important to have pay equity. I think with the Lilly Ledbetter law, we're moving a little closer to some of those recommendations in organizations, but I would go as a system rather than an individual.
My perspective is just a little bit different, but maybe it's because I've tried to negotiate salary in industry, which is a different thing. I actually really lean to the ask. And let me give you a really great example. So I got this really terrific job offer, and my husband happened to have a business coach at the time that was a man, and I was like, what am I supposed to do with this? And he goes, well, the first thing you ought to do is make sure that your old company won't match it. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding. He goes, no. He goes, Deanne, if you're worth anything to that, I bet you're in the CEO's office with a higher salary before 3 o'clock in the afternoon if you tell them right now. And I'm like, oh, you've got to be joking, right? No, that was absolutely true. It actually wasn't 3, it was 2, and he had an offer on the table to promote me and get me more money. And you got it, that's when a man is your better mentor. When you're talking about money, when you're talking about how to be effective, or how to not use so many words when you're talking to guys, because they don't like that, by the way. You go to the girl, but you want something. You ask a guy, and I thought that I have never, now every time I need something in business, I'm like, Tom, what would you do on this? Because I know he knows how to get it. So I believe it's my experience, it's the ask, at least in an industry setting. You just don't even know. And by the way, don't be afraid to leave your current position and expect more money when you do it, and never settle for less than 20%. Start there, because that's what guys do. Right? I mean, seriously.
Thank you for sharing. And one time, I was in the fund development training for the Society of Women Engineers, and the trainers specifically talk about women when they ask this little. When they get this little, women get excited. And the men go ask for this, and then they tend to get this. It's still much more than what women could ask for. So that's one thing we learned, we go out and ask, and then we have nothing to lose, right?
I guess the other thing I would say is we need more women to look at industry positions to also pull the salaries forward. Because you've got to have a pull to increase your salary base, right? And like tends to hire like. So, again, don't be afraid to say that, what my aspiration really is in technical leadership. Don't ever feel like you have to second guess that, because you're going to make more difference for the people who work for you than you can imagine.
Okay, thank you. There's another question is, if I don't want children, are there other women in science issues I will face? If you choose not to have one, are there other issues you will face?
Oh yeah, I think there are many issues. So one of the slides on institutional transformation, sort of lumping all those issues that are there, various kind of support and resources as a lab scientist, right? How much lab space that you get, how much support or matching support from the university you get for when you go out to ask for fund, or what kind of committee am I put in? Am I put in to the type of committee work that I would be networking down as opposed to networking up? If I want upward mobility, I would want to be in committees that allow me to network up. But if I were not given those type of opportunity, what should I do, and how could that be? With or without children, you still have to go through in the academic the first route, which is to be asked to interview and to come for the interview and make an impression, and before you get hired. And we lose a lot of women in that process because of some of the issues that we talked about earlier on, that the language that is used in the recommendation letter or the network that is around that, we know there's really good people because so-and-so told me. And so if we don't really get through those, and if we don't have a very clear and open procedures, and in the hiring, we still would have a lot of issues of increasing the number of women in science.
And one of the first questions when a baby's born is it a boy or a girl? So that gender salience is so important. Whether you have, obviously being a mother, having kids set up a whole set of stereotypes and ideas, but being a woman sets up certain expectations. There are different stages of your career. There'll be different kinds of issues and different kinds of things that you'll be perhaps surprised at, people's expectations or how they expect you to be. But I think having children is just one stage, or grandchildren, or whatever stage that motherhood or choice not to have motherhood is setting up some expectations about what you are like and what your priorities are, and could trigger backlash that you need to be aware of.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, would you talk about an occasion where thinking like a girl worked negatively towards you, and how did this help shape your career and your choice? Anyone of you?
Yeah, I'm thinking, how do you pick one, right? So, like that whole crying meeting thing's not good. So, never good. Really hard to recover from, but don't, you know what, it is what it is, right? So, I think thinking like a girl, I think my hardest time when I think like a girl, that's probably most negative in my career, is that I want very much, I have this sort of need to nurture and rescue people. So like when I have people who work for me who are failing, it is very hard for me to look at the eyes and say, you are failing. I always want to find some context or find some better feedback, or somehow I'm going to fix them. And I would say that's probably where my thinking like a girl sort of attitude doesn't serve me as well. On the other hand, I will say, I get ticked off enough and they hear it, but I guess that's probably my best example.
Anyone of you have any example?
Well, I just think it's actually a good thing to have, both agentic and communal qualities. So I would never advise anybody to act always masculine or always feminine. It takes a blend. So I like you, I could probably think of a lot of examples, but particularly for women, you need to pay attention to both aspects. In the work setting requires certain agentic, forceful qualities that may not come naturally, or maybe they do, but to balance that and recognize the different demands of the situation.
I think one of the things that women have a harder time to say is no. And so when I get my job, I have only one senior woman colleague in my department, and she sat me down and said, you need to learn to say the word no. Because there's so few women in sciences, and they want to have a token woman in all the committees, and you're being really pulled in all directions. And if you don't say no, then up to a point that you would have the fatigue, you would be burned out, and it really affects, all areas of your life, not just your work life, but your family life. I mean, if you're spending 12, 14 hours at work, how could it not affect the other part of your life? So I think that is being a girl. And I'm still trying to learn to say no, because sometimes it's really hard, and you want to help someone, you want to nurture someone, you don't want someone to drop out, but sometimes you just have to know what is your limit, I think.
Okay, thank you. I think our time is almost up, but I want to ask each panelist to give one recommendation that I think worked the best for you, and maybe some of the audience can learn that from you. So quickly, don't give us a big list. I know there's a lot of things we can do to address the issues, but maybe one recommendation or most important thing you think people should learn.
Okay, I have two. We're going to talk about the next session. One is build your social capital, network, go to meetings, make friends, talk to people. And then the second one is balance your communal and agentic. Be competent, but keep your feminine side.
I think the important thing is really to not doubt your ability, because we have a tendency of doing that, and to really put all your effort in. I mean, if it's something that you're passionate about and you want to do it, it might look like there are obstacles, but at the end of the day, it's really worth it. It is a fun thing, and you get to do something that you like, and that's what gets me to work every day.
I guess, My best advice to you is kind of what my graduate professor said to me years and years ago, is that you will always, as women, you will always be underestimated in terms of what you can bring, whether you're in an academic situation, whether you're in an industry situation, whether you're in a community setting. But don't underestimate yourself, because that's actually the greater sin. So you could surprise the heck out of people, but don't ever sell yourself short just because you're trying to balance all of these things.
Okay, thank you. Let us give a round of applause to the panelists. Thank you so very, very much.
This is panel 2 is Imaging the Future of Women in Science. And I will say science and engineering. My name is Natasha De Paula. I'm the Dean of the Armour College of Engineering at IIT, and I'm also a professor of biomedical engineering. And I would like to start by introducing my fellow panelists this afternoon. We have Dr. Nancy Joseph-Rich. She's the head of the Global Development and General Management of the Pharmaceutical Development Division of Takeda Pharmaceutical International. Nancy. We have Gabrielle Leon. She's a co-founder and executive director of Project Exploration. Tiana Reich. Dr. Reich is a group leader of Nano Bio Interfaces Group at the Center for Nanoscale Materials at Agro National Lab. And Dr. Ramil Shah, who is an assistant professor of material science and engineering and assistant professor of orthopedic surgery, Institute for Nanobiotechnology in Medicine at Northwestern University. This is the panel 2 abstract that we were kind of provided as we were thinking into how we develop these sessions. And I decided to project it because I think what I would like to do is to start by looking, and I was also asked as I introduced this discussion to provide some statistical data. So I'm going to try to provide just some data that will relate to what is in the abstract to see if we can come back to this at the end of this introduction. We have had some great discussions through the day, and so I'll try to limit the statistical data because the information is all the same. Let's see if we can have some more time for presentation and discussions. I would like to start by having this discussion in which we want to focus in the future. I would like to thank Dr. Schwartz because her keynote address, it was a wonderful reminder of how hard it was for women, all the good work that women have done before us, and I see a lot of young women in this audience. So that reminds us that for some of us that it has been easier, how difficult it was. But it's also a reminder of there is a lot of work yet to be done. And this is really what I wish that we're going to focus some of the discussions this afternoon into, how we're going to move ahead, because the challenges are there. We have more women in the profession, and the future is, to some extent, I have to say that we are making progress, but the progress is still very slow. So, with that being said, let's go into some of the data that I have, the quick statistics. The first one that you have seen in a different form earlier this morning, it talks about the ratios between women and men by degree. And what we see, I just pick up some of the biological and biomedical sciences. We see how the abstract claims that we're gaining ground, we have more women obtaining these degrees. So we see the Bachelor of the MS and the PhD. Those are the numbers, are not that bad. Then we have the category of the physical science, science, technology, math, statistics, and chemistry, which are kind of in between biological and biomedical sciences and computer and informational sciences, closer to the biological and biomedical science. That seems to be the area that we are doing best. Then you see how there's a significant drop in percentages when we move into computer and information science. And when we get to engineering, we really, really have a lot of work to do in that area. You saw this graph this morning. These are all from NSF reports. And I'm just going to take a sec here just to show the women are the yellow line. And as you can see, it's moving up, but it's moving up very slow. I have to say the slope is, is something that we got to worry about. These are both in the top. This is for all the areas in science, technology, and engineering, and math. And in the bottom is engineering, which seems to, again, as I said, an area that really needs attention. Here to give you an example of what's happening in the workforce, and I pick up this example because I want to add a little bit more than what are the numbers. And so this comes out of a survey that was done with 42 companies, 416 people serving in the board of directors. The percentages, and this data is a little old, but it hasn't changed that much. In 2006, you see in the order of 11% women directors, and in executive positions, about 8%. We have increased about 1%. But what I think is another aspect to look here carefully is look at the absolute number. It's not just a percentage, but it's also the fact that we are talking about having one woman working in isolation in an environment, and this is something that we need to worry about. The critical mass is a must for us to be able to advance. Here, this is a table, again, to get us thinking a little bit about the future. When we look at what is happening in academia, we saw the numbers earlier. We see professors, associate professors, and assistant professors. So what we see is that the numbers are consistently better at the level of assistant professors. But we know that one of the main challenges that we have in academia that is being recognized is how do you make it to a full professor? And this is really, we look at those numbers, and again, in some areas are better than others. Engineering, still the worst. But the whole point is that what's going to happen to all those women who are now doing very well? There has been changes in which there is motivation, and the system, it is being prompted to hire more women and give the opportunities. And we have fantastic junior faculty doing great. The question is what's going to happen? And we heard earlier today about this incremental and accumulation of disadvantages, that although small they are, they pile up. So you may be sitting there doing wonderful as an assistant professor, and if we don't worry about what's going to happen, and this is exactly the challenges that we have in the future. So this is what this session is about. I just have a couple more slides that I'll go very quickly. I also wanted to bring up a different aspect here, which is the characteristic of the recipients who have earned doctorates. And this data is in 2006, but again, it hasn't changed that much. You saw the trends. What I wanted to highlight here is look in the top, it tells you by sex, male or female, in engineering, life science, and physical science, what is the percentage? And then we also go back in the bottom line so that we bring some of the issues of the lifestyle and work balances that we talk about, is the percentages of the population earning the PhD that are married. This is independent of being male or female, and this is a good topic for discussion into who is carrying the load, who is holding the help, what is happening. We see that the percentages are about 50% all across. When you look into the percentage of women in the different disciplines, it is different. So I'm looking forward in the afternoon open session to have more discussions on that. This is one that is also important because when we look at the average age, and when we're looking here, we're dealing with women receiving their PhD, and that is where women are in their childbearing age, and that is then the big challenge is the competition between the biological clock and the tenure clock. And this is another thing that is very important to be addressed. And the last slide that I have here is to show a little bit in the demographics, just again to emphasize the challenge that we have in the future when we look at the population, 29 and younger, female and male ratio, and these are the people employed as scientists and engineers. So if you compare that with what is happening in the younger ages and the older ages, it is a flip in there, that the percentages are getting higher for women. Again, what is going to happen to all these women as we move on? So with that in mind, I just wanted to mention that in addition to some of the very important reports that we've been reading in the last 10 years, including the MIT report in 1999, books like Weissel's Law by Virginia Valia, which is a very valuable reading. These are a couple things to check out if you haven't had the opportunity. Why So Few? It just was published last month. And there is a good analysis, provide a lot of statistics and trying to understand why the issues that we're dealing with. And the Catalyst actually provides some good information as well. So I have here a set of questions. So this is for the later period. This is just based into, if we go back into what the abstract was telling us, things that we need to talk about, some of the data that I hope prompted some ideas into what we should discuss. We'll get back to this after the presentations. So now I would like to introduce the first panelist, and I think is Dr. Joseph Rich. Nancy.
Thank you so much. Good morning, or good afternoon, I should say. My name is Nancy Joseph Ridge, and I am currently the global head of development for Takeda Pharmaceuticals Company. This is a Japanese-based company. I'll tell you a little bit about the company and then a little bit about myself. Takeda is a company that's over 200 years old. Started primarily with medicinal herbs in the 1800s and grew to a presence over the last couple of hundred of years of being the largest pharmaceutical company in Japan. And it wasn't until early 70s when they looked at having a presence within the US and really grow from Japan and had a joint venture with Abbott Pharmaceutical Company. At that time, the joint venture then had presence here in the US and then started to have presence in other parts of the world, Europe and now Asia Pacific. With my career entrance into industry, I'm a rheumatologist. I'm a physician by training, rheumatologist and internist. My undergrad was, however, in chemistry, and at the time I thought I was going to go into research chemistry, but decided to go into medicine and got my degree 25 years ago. And 20 of those years have been in some type of research, as mostly clinical research. The transition from academia into industry was one that was a bit challenging, and to look at what would I change from going to practicing with patients to entering into an industry where you're not giving direct patient care, but being able to have impact by doing research, and that would be pharmaceutical research. Within the industry, what I've realized is that I've moved from academia into a pharmaceutical industry. Two parallel things that I realized just as for the topic of discussion here was one, when I was in academia, what was stated previously as far as being an assistant professor was very easy to attain. But the move from associate professor to full professor was fairly daunting, and it was very difficult to get to that next level. In industry, what I realized is that getting to an associate director or director level is obtainable, but then getting to the vice president, senior vice president, and then to heads of department is very difficult also. So although there are different industries, there are parallel for women in both of them. And just let me give you a few statistics that also goes to what Dr. DePaula mentioned. When I look at the industry for pharmaceutical companies, basically those numbers are reflective of what she just said. You look at board members, they're usually 10%. That means it's usually one woman sitting on the board, if that. Usually for the large pharmaceutical companies, there are not. Executive level, which means your senior vice presidents, your executive vice presidents, your division heads are about 10% also. But there's a discrepancy when we look at what we have as our management level. When I look at our management level across our industry, I see that there's about 40% women within that. But then what happens when you get to that next level and you move up, you're only up to about 20%. And then at another more executive level or board level, it's 10%. One of the things that have been looked at in Europe is making sure that there's laws and legislations to try to pull women up into the more executive levels. And although there's one law in Norway that mandates 40% of board members should be female, it's only about 9%. So it's not a mandate, it's not really a legislative effort that can help this situation. So I think the question is what are the hindrances or what are some of the issues that that stops this the elevation? When I was head of the U.S. organization, one of the things that I did when I looked at my staff, which is the executive staff for the U.S. organization, I looked across the functions and I thought to myself I would pick the best individual, regardless of race, gender, skill, or anything, or anything, but based primarily only on skill. And networking and discussing with others as to who were the best individuals for this position. Just didn't want to know the name, but just who was the best and who they were. And what happened is that about 40 to 50% of the executive levels turned out to be women. But one of the things that do happen is that sometimes we ask very qualified individuals who are women whether or not they want to be at that next level. And what I have received back is there are parts of life that does affect that ability to be able to get to that next level. And so one of the things that we've looked at is what are some of the things that we could do as an organization to assist women to get to that next level, be it, we talked about mentoring, there are certain things that are able to do as far as flexibility for positions, but there's a certain level that you get to that you have to really look and rely on others to assist you to be able to do well. The other thing is that now at this level, and I look across the organization in other regions, we also see the same issue. In Japan, quite a bit of time being spent looking at having Japanese women move up from a manager's level into a director's level. Very similar issues being faced there. And again, what are we doing? Trying to network, assist, mentor. If we can get women to assist them to help to be able to support at that executive or senior level, that is very key. So with that, I think that when I was in the back for a moment during the speaker's talk, someone asked about how do you have a mentor? How do you get to have someone who mentors you? For me, it was, I had many men, I could think of 3, and I had 2 women. And the way I finally realized that you get a mentor is you ask them. You basically say, I need help to decide X, Y, or Z, and to go to them and have them have some support. If it is, and I think it's regardless of gender, I think you have to look at who is the best person to be able to help you to obtain that next level. So with that, I see that I'm running out of time. I'll leave that with one thought, is that one of the things that when we look at what do we need to achieve and what do we need to get to progress, two things I say besides. One is, again, find someone who can support you, mentor you. The second is technically be as advanced and as up to date with your scientific or technical skills, because obviously that is what is really necessary to make you successful. So I'll turn over now to my next panelist.
Cool. Hi, I'm Gabrielle Lyon with Project Exploration. And where is Ben? Does this just, oh, look, it just goes. That's awesome. All right. So I really took this question of imagining the future really to heart, to say, you know, how could we imagine the future? And that's really what I kind of want to talk about. But I want to do a quick check-in because we've spent the better part of the day together, and I'm just kind of curious who's in the room. So if you are mostly a student at any level, undergraduate, high school graduate, postdoc, could you just raise your hand real quick? I'm just kind of curious. Okay, great. If you are mostly a teacher, whether you're teaching at the high school or pre-collegiate level, if you're a teacher at the doctoral level, can you raise your hand if you're teachers? Okay, great. If you're someone who is writing about science, I think we have, my sense is there's some science writers in the room. People are trying to write about science, communicate, science media people, great. And then if you're on the industry side, if you're working kind of creating the products of science, technology, engineering, can you raise your hand? Great, okay, thank you. That is super helpful. And now we know who each others are. We're hearing a lot about the idea that progress is slow. And I think we're starting to get a sense of this landscape and of some themes, mostly in academia for women. But you know, when we think about the future, we got to think about progress towards what? What is it we actually want to see as the future? And so I've been really thinking quite a bit about, you know, when we think about what is the progress we'd like to see, it makes me wonder, what is it we're actually trying to measure? So a lot of this discussion, and for very particular reasons, we're looking a lot about measurement in terms of degrees granted. It's for 50 years, it's how we've thought about science, technology, engineering, for very good reasons. It's one of the primary, education is the primary gateway to economic opportunity, right? So I don't want to be dismissive of that set of data. And yet, poised on the 21st century, what else could we be measuring? What are the metaphors we could be using to imagine a different future? And I think that's really the charge that I feel like we need to embrace as women in science, especially since there's so many of us kind of cutting our teeth on what the future will be. One thing I'm very struck by in looking around this room is that this is pretty representative of the racial and age diversity we see in science, but it is not necessarily representative of the diversity we see in America in terms of its population. There are very few Latinos in the room. There are some African Americans, but certainly not representative of the population. And so when I think about what it means to imagine the future and science, I have to first acknowledge to you, I really come to science through the back door, and really studied history. I'm trained as a historian. I really studied history. But before I even got to college, I was very interested in change. How does change happen? I started the first environmental group at my high school, and here's the first ever protest in Bergen County, New Jersey. Who would have thought it? We're protesting watershed, really the development of the watershed. Students for Environmental Awareness and Action. We wanted to get rid of styrofoam in the cafeteria. These are still issues that are with us today. I ended up at the University of Chicago, and I studied many things, but it wasn't very long before I was arrested at an anti-war rally, literally on my first day of work in the admissions office. But luckily, the dean of admissions was good enough to accept my one phone call, which I chose to make to tell them I wouldn't be able to make it into work today. When I was at the University of Chicago, I went there because I really felt that it was an opportunity to learn about whatever it was I was curious about, and I ended up spending a lot of time on religious mysticism, very good grounding if you're going to be a science educator, and found myself eventually through philosophy into the history of science, and that's really become my passion, and was lucky enough to spend quite a lot of time on the history of anthropology, and that's kind of how I made my money. I had a researcher job that took me all over the country, and I worked quite a bit while I was in school. I had an incredible opportunity as someone working on religious medieval mysticism and translating Spanish texts. I was invited to go as a writer on an expedition to Africa. And it was really my first in-depth experience into the world of science. So that's me in the red shirt trying to figure out how do you get a dinosaur out of the ground. But what was most striking to me when I came back from expedition after expedition and introducing many new dinosaur creatures, this is going by itself, so I apologize, the skipping around. After introducing these creatures to the world at the school that I was teaching 2 blocks away from the University of Chicago, my students, which I had as a work study position, my students never had the chance to touch a fossil. And when you touch something that is 130 million years old, it gives you a different kind of perspective on the world. The same as when you look at a molecule, or you study an atom, or you try to expand your vision of what the universe is like. It starts to have you think about lots of other things in new ways. So I started with my husband, Paul Serino, who's a paleontologist at the University of Chicago, Project Exploration. And the idea was to create opportunities for the students least likely to get involved with science to do science. You learn a lot when you start at that end of the spectrum about what the obstacles are for participation and what the systemic barriers are for advancement and change. And these are just some of our students and teachers, and here's a little plug for the breakout session I'm running with Jerry if you want to hear more about Project Exploration. We were really focused on come to the 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock session, and we'll be talking about education and outreach, so I'm not going to talk a lot about that right now. But one of the things that we've learned about working with students who are 70% girls, who are 35% Latino, and the rest African American. When you work with students who come from socioeconomic backgrounds where it's not easy to get involved with science, and you see them find success, like our students in this picture. This is a graduating class 2 years ago. When you see students like this find themselves through science, it's not only transformative for them, it's also transformative for their families. It's also transformative for their teachers. But here's the question. Are these students the ones who are going to be the leaders of the future? All the statistics we've been hearing today have told us probably not, right? And if you're particularly concerned about students of color, they're just 2% of the women scientists out there. And so I won't go into all of the statistics other than to say, if we care about reimagining the future, women must be part of a much more expansive idea of what change can be about. If for no other reason than we've got extraordinary strengths and talents, and we have some increasing sensitivity to what the real barriers are. We shouldn't forget that this is actually how most students experience science before they get to college, and it may be a big part of why they don't actually find themselves pursuing science. So this is how most students experience science, and it's not about wonder, it's not about discovery. So if we go to the next slide, 18, great. Who recognizes this? What's this? Sputnik. How big is Sputnik? Yeah, it's like the size of a basketball. Talk about striking fear into the hearts of men. All you need is like a really big basketball tossed up into space. But this is Sputnik. It generated the biggest investment in science. It created the main forms of science that we think of today through national labs. Next. And the investment strategies in science in 1959 were
shaped as follows. Resources focus on the top 5 or 10% of students academically. Government funding is mostly at universities and to a lesser extent museums. And high caliber enrichment programs really target students who can test in or whose families can pay for them. I want to leap ahead a couple of slides if we can. And hey, 1959, 2009, we have the same investment strategies. Educate to innovate. Let's reinvest in our 1959 strategies. It's what's happening right now. We're trying to get in front of the train, but the question is, if you want to actually make change and reimagine the future, we really do need to shift what we're thinking about as measures and metaphors. This is the problem from my perspective. It's not the leaky pipeline, it's the pipeline. This metaphor is not helping us. Now, the feminist in me says, you know, plumbing metaphors and women, not such a great combination to start off with. But more importantly, the pipeline, think about what that pipeline makes us as women, as teachers and mentors. You get in on one end, you stick with the program, and you get out on the other end. If you do something different, you're a failure. And the teachers are like PVC pipe, and the students are like sludge, and you know, it's not an inspiring, useful metaphor, I think, for imagining the future, and yet we use it all the time, we've heard it all the time. The pipeline is the problem. We need to imagine a new kind of metaphor that embraces mentoring, that it lets us get off the road when we're gonna have a kid, or 2 or 3, that lets us get involved with science when we're 40, even if we didn't pick high school calculus the way we should have because we didn't know about it. When we talk about what we should be looking for as indicators, I think there's 2 things we have to look for in addition to gender when we're thinking about how to involve more women, for sure, and certainly more diverse kinds of students. We need to be looking at the achievement gap. When you struggle in school, you don't get to do science. If you don't read and write well, you don't get to do science. This doesn't mean that you can't think creatively. It doesn't mean that you don't have ideas. But just as we're screening our applicants and we're trying to read those recommendations more carefully, I think that transition between high school and college is a really critical one. We need to think more expansively. And the socioeconomic gap really plays into who we're seeing gets involved with science. We're all of us, if we're in science or industry, in positions to really be thinking more creatively about that. Next. When we think about future programs, this is coming out of project exploration, recruitment, retention programs. I was really struck, especially by the panel this morning, the very first panel this morning. We were talking about our lives and how to create these industry and academic environments. You know, these are a set of ideas that come out of doing pre-collegiate programs, but imagine if every environment was relationship-based, that students were at the center of what was worthwhile, growing and learning, that it was interest-driven as a way to make your way, and that there was readily available kind of high-impact programs for growth. Again, I think of these things primarily in terms of a pre-collegiate environment, but I was very struck this morning as I heard from women who have been at this much longer than I have, that it may be the academic and industry environment may have something to do with this. And it's not just about science, right? It's about our lives, it's about our relationships, it's about our parents are getting sick and we need to take care of them. Next. So future science, if we were to imagine the future science, I would suggest the following, that we really re-examine the purpose of science at a national agenda level, from competitiveness as being the only and primary purpose to one around access and equity, that we think about measurement, and I am a very data-oriented person. I like data. I just think we could be asking different questions. What if we moved at a very basic level from testing students, again, expansive idea of students, to knowing students? And metaphors, we could all be coming up with a much more useful metaphor than the pipeline, and maybe it's something around pathways and partnerships. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Diana Reich, and I'm going to try to convey to you a little bit about the status and future of the women in the national lab system. So as you can see here, I didn't sign my name under the talk. It's because for the last 5 years, I was really not involved much in women in science, just because I was before that, but at 2005, I was given an option to give my own group from the scratch, because there was a new division in Argonne National Laboratory. It's called Center for Nanoscale Materials, and they told me, here, if you have the vision, how would you fill your group and make it work? So whatever I'm going to present today, it's actually thanks to Christina Negri, which was a Women Program Initiator, and Qatar Hafidi, who is a current Women's Program Initiator at Argonne. But the story with my group is I hired 2 women that were the best that one could find, and I can tell you that they're publishing, last year they had each of them a paper in Nature, and I have also hired a guy who is completely understanding the issues of family, advancement, promotion. He's young, but we actually work really great in combination. They're young, and things are changing in your generation. Mine was a little bit different. But here is the background for national labs. Women in DLE labs didn't have attention that much as the ones in academia, probably because the Department of Energy was not pushing for those issues. They had other issues they had to deal with, I guess. But Argonne was the only national lab that 20 years ago have established the women organization that is management supported. And thanks to Alan Shrisham, actually, that is here, he was a lab director at that time, the women have fought their ways to get a position of women program initiator that is a quarter of their salary is sponsored by the management. The reason being is they organized a successful conference for women in search of science and career in search of women. And there was such a successful conference that the management wanted to keep it going, and the women wouldn't settle for doing it unless they have paid 1/4 of the time for one of the women that organizes it. And that is really true, because we shouldn't deal with women's issue just in a time when we have the break between the lunch or at the Saturday at home. We need to be supported by the management. That is the key for the success of the program. That's why Argonne still now has very strong Women in Science WIST program going on, and I think it's right now in the position to do a lot of changes. We have the management that fully supports women in science. But what are the numbers as we look here at the graph? The laser doesn't work, but you can see that from 2000 up to now, we had the increase from 12 to 16%. And that's a good increase. I mean, that's really a big change. But when you look at the pool that human resources have given us as the pool from which we can withdraw the women, we're almost reaching it. And I cannot believe that that's the truth. I think there is something wrong with these numbers. So I think the numbers are really very important. If it is a leaky pipeline or a pipeline at all, as you said, Gabrielle said before, or what is it? Or I liked what Kylie was saying this morning when she was identifying the issues. I think I'm going to meet with her afterwards to try to get from her the data why the women drop off the science career. This is something that we have to change, because that's how we're going to increase our pool and increase the number of women. So why are we only talking about these numbers all the time? Because I think the measure of the success is actually how many women do you have around you, and do you have a critical mass that your way of thinking that is probably off in certain, you have different point of view, but that it matters, you need a critical mass. If one part of the system thinks differently, it's not going to make much difference. But if 50% do, then the things are going to move naturally. You don't need any more than women in science organizations, because the things are going to be average and the solutions are going to be get by the common consensus. So number of women in the labs are not great. If you look down, it did improve from 2002 to 2009, but there is still a huge difference, especially in the positions that are higher. These numbers down, as the numbers increase, you're higher in the management, 709 and 7010 being senior scientists in the lab. And you can see it went from 5 to 8, which is good, but it's not good enough for 7 years, I think. So there is a big thing. How do we how do we approach the promotion issue and negotiation? So I think the panel this morning was very instructive for me to understand that we are not only us in the lab, that we don't know how to ask the questions, but it's just around the whole issue with the science. The women don't go and ask the questions, and I realized that when we had some happening in the lab, the director wanted to change the offices, giving the offices by the window, going to certain sciences, the offices in the cubicle, going to the postdocs, or whatever. And suddenly my collaborator, younger, she was moved from the office, from the window inside, and she was really furious. And she told me, you know what? I really never asked for any promotion, but from now on, Tiana, I'm really going to talk to you about promotion. And I was like, my God, I'm asking her all the time to tell me about her promotion. And I want her to ask me. And when we discuss our careers, I ask her, please, can you tell me where you want to be next year? Is there something I could do? But she never tells me, because she thinks that she's insulting me by asking me. So it's really something that we have to address. And this is going to change by having the role models of the women increased in higher positions. Argonne is having an advance. During last year, we have appointed 2 division directors that are women, so we now have 3. So they're not alone up there when they discuss with the management about how the lab should develop. So this underrepresentation in the higher position leads to marginalization. So the directors, if there is only one woman, like my mentor, Marion Thurnauer, she became a division director while I was there, and she told me, Tiana, I'm again by myself. I don't know how to make the difference. And she was marginalized. And then after a few years, she fought in her position. She fought really much to see that the number of the women in chemistry, especially, that it's going to increase. She was looking at every single search committee for women and was making sure that there are women in the pool that are being hired for that position. So what actions plan, what we can do? I think that the environment, the demographics is really changing right now. The young people that are coming are really different than what we were in our generation. So the women that are now in the higher position, again, do not know what they should do in order to change and make the climate more friendly for the young women that are coming. So we were planning to do a climate survey in order to get how the things are now, what is the demographics right now. When I talk to my female postdocs, they're not actually as me, they're not trying to make so much difference in science as I wanted to. They want to have a balanced life. And this is the right way to do. Maybe we were wrong when we were doing, the things by brutal force, trying to change everything. Maybe that was our time because we had to make the first push. But now is the time to do the things more balanced. We want to work with lab management, and they, I think, want to work with us in order to implement institutionally the changes. So we are, as a steering committee at Women in Science, we are trying to make a new organization that's going to kind of go from every single level in the laboratory and try to implement the changes, find the data, and also implement the changes. So also, we want to make sure that there are clear, transparent guidelines and criteria for the performance review and the promotion. We think that's critical to enhance the women in the higher positions, that's going to be the role models and monitor the situation of women in the lab. So also we want to improve also the pipeline for the women in the management. I feel funny now saying pipeline after you totally destroyed it. But anyway, those women that want to go in the management position, that they get encouraged and have the courses that are going to help them understand the issues, what are different between researchers and the management. At the end, I think the mentorship is critical, as was said in the keynote speaker, our keynote speaker today. And especially, I think, the dual mentorship, also having women and the men, because sometimes we don't know which questions to ask or how do we want to proceed. We don't know where we are going, and they can actually help us in that. Thank you.
Good afternoon. And I guess the biggest challenge about being the last speaker is that a lot of the issues have already been covered. And a lot of the statistics that I was going to go over actually have been covered. But I guess what I'm going to do a little change in my presentation is, thank you, is sort of giving more of a personal view on, well, where I am at in my career. I'm probably the youngest of the females who have presented as far as being in academia. I'm a new assistant professor that just started last September. So I guess it's going to be a talk about what my fears are still and some of my thoughts on maybe how can we improve the numbers, especially in academia. So let me just go here. Just to give you a little background about my pathway to my career. First, I feel very fortunate to be here, and I feel very fortunate to have a position that I have in academia, especially at a research institution. But there are still some doubts I have about my career, and hopefully there's going to be change as far as really increasing the numbers in academia so that there is a more support from other female faculty. So I started off after high school, actually, at a community college, Harper College, which is in Illinois, in Palatine, where I got my associate. I then went to Northwestern to get my bachelor's in material science and engineering. I fell in love, I got introduced into the field of biomaterials, and I really love to do research. And so I decided to go to grad school to get my PhD, and I went to MIT with a specialization in biomaterials. After that, since I'm from Chicago, I wanted to come back. I did a postdoc in Northwestern, and that was about for a year and a half, where I got promoted to a research assistant professor, so that's a non-tenure track position, for about a year. And then last year, I was fortunate enough to get an offer from Northwestern to stay on as an assistant professor, the tenure track position, and I'm there right now. And I actually have a joint appointment here in material science and engineering, and also in the orthopedic surgery department. So this is my pathway here. And just going off of some of the surveys as far as raising our hands, I'm curious as to, of the students here, how many of you are considering an academic career path? Can you raise your hands? Okay. And how many are considering an academic career path but are not sure if that's the way to go? Most of it. Okay, so, and that's where I want to have, to see a change, because there's a lot of things that we don't know about transitioning into the tenure track position. And I think if we really work as mentors, or people who are in industry, to better prepare, especially females, to go into the academic career path, it won't be so overwhelming. And so, I'm just going to skip over some slides since it's been already the statistics. Basically, at NU, it's the same trends as far as women being the minority as far as faculty goes. The numbers are much lower when it comes to the McCormick School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, so that's the lowest as far as the faculty that are female in this school, as well as the Weinberg College of Arts and Sciences here. It's sort of in the mid-range, but still the numbers aren't there as far as really pushing the numbers to increase. So it's pretty steady. So what can we do? What are the changes that we need to make in order to have a better increase in these numbers and have a better environment for females who are currently in academia, as well as ones who are considering a career path in academia and also in science? So this was just a quote from at the annual Northwestern has a faculty diversity committee, and this is a quote from their report, and it says, first of all, in these graphs, it just shows that, especially for tenure-eligible women, over the years, especially in 2000, you actually start to see a decrease in the retention of women. And so really addressing why is that and what we have to do. So they say that the disparity between the apparent progress of tenured women faculty and tenure-eligible women faculty points to a potential weakness in attracting and retaining tenure-eligible women at Northwestern. To stay competitive with its peers, NU must improve its efforts to recruit and retain women among its tenure-track junior faculty. This means increasing the number of women in the recruitment pool, increasing the number of offers made to women, and ensuring that the acceptance yield, in fact, leads to greater number of tenure-eligible women on campus. So they definitely acknowledge that there is this discrepancy and this need to make some changes. And these have already been went over as far as statistics go, but really going forward, and what is the bottom line, of course, there's significantly less amount of women who pursue, and more importantly, who pursue a full career in academia, going all the way to a full professorship, especially in the science and engineering fields. And the problems, as in the quote, is one, recruiting females in science and engineering towards an academic career path, as well as retaining these females who are tenure eligible to a full professorship. And so in the next slides, I'll just give you my thoughts, my honest thoughts about where I'm at as far as my own experience and my worries and hopes that it can change. So what are the issues and how can we improve? We know the issues. So one of the areas, as was mentioned also before, is in the recruiting. So, and this comes recruiting and also mentorship. So being more aggressive as far as really looking and pursuing, especially females in the undergraduate, graduate, and postdoc fields, and really as a female, really giving them a positive experience in academia. So much of the experience in your graduate school and postdoc stages really influence where you end up going. I know a lot of people, or a lot of my own colleagues, that decided to go into a different field because of the bad experience they have in their group. So it's really important that we have mentors that are very positively influential as far as going down the academic path. The other issues is so encouraging females, dual career decisions. So this is a very important issue, especially for women. In my situation, my husband is an orthopedic surgeon, so we had a very difficult time making the decision as far as where we would go. And there are programs that Northwestern, as well as other institutions, have as far as trying to place your spouses. But that's really if your spouse is in an academic career path also. So it's easier to do that because they can sort of make a dual career they can make a dual career acceptance or offer to both of you in order for you to actually come to a university. But when it comes to your spouses that have different careers, not in academia, it's really hard. And so how can we make a better programs to expand that program so that it can actually, we can make collaborations with hospitals or companies that can actually help in making the dual career decision. So mentorship has been brought up a lot today, and I think, and I agree, I completely agree as far as really the importance of mentorship. And in this scenario, I want to sort of give a different twist on mentorship, in that perhaps females who are in this mentor position, we need to be more proactive, not just waiting to be asked about, you know, what are the opportunities, how do we get to that, but actually pursuing females and really seeing how we can encourage them to go down this science and academic track. Really sharing their experiences, advice, helping in the decision making, serving as a community for support. So this symposium is a great opportunity, and it's a good start to really increase the opportunities for women. And the last thing is academic life in general. So this goes towards the potential for not having to change your decisions because you feel that you can't go down a path just because it's a difficult path to go down. And perhaps instead of having an academic career path that's so difficult for women, maybe we need to make changes so that it's a little bit more easier to balance the responsibilities in academia as well as balancing family and life. So, and I think here, there's many advances here as far as recruiting and mentorship, as far as different programs that are already in place, but really making a difference and changing academic life in general maybe would make academia the more enticing for females. So tenure evaluation, this is the current ways that we're evaluated as far as getting to tenure: publications, grants, teaching, and a community service. But why is there a problem in retaining women in academia? And some of the things that I've come up with is perhaps maybe the transition is really difficult. It can be overwhelming. When I got into my position, I had no idea of how to budget or what it entails. So we need more programs to really prepare females and also males towards an academic track in the postdoc and also graduate time points. Committee responsibilities is another thing that's not talked about. So most of the time in grad school and postdoc, you concentrate on your research. You know how to do your research, you hone your skills in doing research, but there's other things that comes into having a career in academia, coming up with grant money, the time it takes to prepare classes, so perhaps courses that help prepare and make postdocs and grad students realize the amount of time it actually takes to create a class, pressures to publish or perish. So really trying to train, better training for these younger females in academia towards a more academic track. So one other thing is that oftentimes junior faculty, like myself, are at a time in their lives where they're going through also personal transitions, including marriage, starting a family, and also continuing to raise a family if you already have kids. And so time management is a real challenge when it comes to the work-life balance. And so how can academia actually instill better policies as far as being flexible? So here, this shows NU's policy for childbearing and child-rearing leave. And for childbearing, you have one academic term off. It corresponds to a reduction in teaching load. And also in child rearing, so after you bear your child or adopt, you have another option to have another academic year term, not year, an academic term. So Northwestern is on a quarter system. And, so this is actually what I hear is a pretty good policy. But what if we do need more time? You know, what are the options for women in faculty or also men faculty who want to take longer leave? can this academic policy be flexible? And it should be transparent if we can actually make changes to this policy. So the expectations during this leave is that you don't need to serve on committees, but you still need to maintain your responsibility as far as supervising your students. And you do have reduction in teaching load, but no faculty members' teaching load will be reduced to less than one course per year. So I guess my main point here is that usually the child rearing phase doesn't end after 2 quarters, right? So you still have a baby there, and so it's really, it's okay. So now what I do, you know, my child rearing or child bearing term is over, but I still need that time, and so what are the possible options and scenarios for females who need more time? Can we have continued teaching relief? And teaching, and it comes at a very opportune time because I just started teaching in actually this quarter. And so I really underestimated the amount of time it actually takes to prepare a class. And I was talking to other women that I can't imagine actually having a child now because there's actually absolutely no time I have, and let alone spending time with my husband, who we just got married last year. And so it's really difficult to manage, especially being a junior faculty. So one of the suggested changes, I guess, that we may, and this is just to start the conversation of how we can actually make drastic changes to the academic policy, perhaps should academic research institutions consider different types of tenure tracks? And this goes off of your different strengths. For example, can you pick a track that's more research and mentorship focused and not have to have so much responsibility as far as teaching goes, or vice versa. If you like teaching, you want to be able to spend more of your time teaching rather than having so much pressure to publish or perish or write grants. So can we actually have different tenure tracks so that we can actually choose based on our own strengths and interests? This will give us some type of relief in the responsibilities we have, especially trying to get tenure. And this, more importantly, can also potentially enhance teaching and mentorship environment if faculty have the choice. So if you can choose what you actually want to do and want to spend your time, and then you can change over time too. Perhaps this will make it a more meaningful environment for students. And of course, with these changes, we need to reflect on how tenure is evaluated. Because right now it hasn't changed, right? So I think the challenge is trying to see where we can work with the people in the higher ups as far as really changing our environment. And so especially the young people who are considering going down the academic track, it's really, in order to make change, we need to give suggestions, right? And so we need to start the conversation and not just have it end at today, but actually make a change and make a difference. And your voices are actually very important as far as really relaying what your concerns are and potential ways to improve life in academia for women, especially women in science. So thanks.
So the difference is probably as in any management level is when I first entered industry is very technical, very based on individual performance and technical skills that I needed to do. Day-to-day work was more around our specific studies in individual trials. But as we go up, it's much more, and we're just hearing about this, budgeting, organization, management, larger groups. So I got more responsibility as far as different groups that I had to be in charge of. So it wasn't just my clinical trials anymore. It was the publication group, and then the medical writing group, and then I got quality assurance. And as you go up and up, you have more groups that impact the studies, but you have to manage them. And now because of global responsibilities, I'm responsible for all the regions. I don't do that much as far as the study specific. I get a high level information, but it's more around the management or organization of the groups, the different groups around the world that I take care of.
Thank you. We have another question. This is an interesting one. What if you learn that you have been chosen to be in a study section, committee, or faculty position because they needed to fill the female quota and not because of your merit? Does anybody want to take that one?
Yeah, I can actually take that one. I was on several committees like that, and I can tell you, I think it still matters. I think I did my job by supplying the candidates that are women, and I think every opportunity is good to do for increasing the number of women in science.
I also just want to chime in. I think one of the things, although I'm chosen not to do academics, this question of mentorship comes up again because some committees are more powerful than other committees. And so that's one thing is if you are the only woman or you are the only person of color in these academic settings as well as industry settings, often you will see, and we see this in our own students and in many of my colleagues, will get asked to do many, many more things than sometimes your male colleagues. And so that's where being strategic about saying yes can help and where a mentor really can help. Because I think that there's, and often what I have seen and also what I've experienced is you want to have a chance to make a difference. So I think that there's ways in which having a mentor help work those decisions can be very, very important because you want to be a team player, you want to be influential, but you don't necessarily want to or should be saying yes to everything depending on where you are in your career.
Yeah, I would like to add to this question that two things. I think this is not, are you asked to be in a committee? This is like you get the appointment because of that. And I will say, you take it as an opportunity and you go and you make a difference because that's what it is. That's one comment. The other comment related with that is that they're having hell of a hard time these days to appoint a woman just to fill the quota and because there's no merit. Because if they want to fill the quota, there are plenty of qualified women out there, so they can do both. So I really think that the thing is, take it, do it, and make the difference with that opportunity. You know, it's not anymore. We are not anymore at in the times that we need to be proving ourselves all the time, as it used to be. But it is in there. So just do your job, and you know, show them that you can do it actually better than anybody else in the room.
That's right.